Well, all right, everybody. Thank you for having me come out. As they say, the definition of an expert is someone from over 500 miles away. So that's what had to get me from Maryland to bring me here. But I enjoy being around everyone. The hospitality in Southern California has been phenomenal, and I appreciate you guys giving me the time to talk. My talk, I'm a little bit nervous. Might be a little bit more to the right than some of our previous speakers, but I've thoroughly enjoyed everyone who came before me. And there's a lot of things I'd like to talk about in reference to those previous speeches. One of the questions that has been asked several times now is, where does the movement go from here? But let me tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Matthew Heimbach. I was born in Poolesville, Maryland. It's a small town that doesn't have a traffic light. And the reason I'm here, Tyler kind of did the introduction, I went from the small farm town all the way to the big city of Baltimore, and I got to see the joys of diversity. As I was talking to some of the comrades earlier, for instance, I was late for work a couple weeks ago because one of my crackhead neighbors stabbed another one of my crackhead neighbors, and then the police paddy wagon had me blocked in. So that's the joy of living in Baltimore. That's not a rare occurrence, that's a rather common occurrence. So I got to see firsthand what diversity does to us. Where my home state of Maryland, unfortunately, has been occupied by the Third World invasion, and we recently passed a law which creates in-state tuition for illegal immigrants. So if anyone here from California wants to come to a Maryland school, enjoy paying twice the money. But if you sneak over the border and make it to Maryland, you get to pay the same rate as every other single Marylander. And that just strikes me as fundamentally unfair. And of course we see the Black Student Union, which has a giant Black Panther painted on their wall, and a nice homage to Nelson Mandela. And I thought, well, that's a little interesting. And then I see the Hispanic organizations working with La Raza and Casa de Maryland, openly calling for more third world immigration, allowing Spanish to be also the language of the United States, and basically wanting to destroy white folks. I kind of have a problem with that. And then you see all these different advocacy groups. There's not one for white people. So I went to the college Republicans, because as the left has always told us, the Republicans are the party of white people. So when I come in the first day, I say, hi, my name is Matthew Heimbach. I'm interested about the concerns of white people. And they said, there's the door. So I found out really quick that the college Republicans were not exactly supportive of really anything whatsoever. Tax cuts for multinational corporations, but not even the blue-collar working class, which every conservative right-wing movement has been based on. So I created an organization, a chapter of an organization called Youth Western Civilization, in which we, by the end of the semester, or the end of the year, had been run off campus because our Jewish advisor who was the only advisor we could find, did not like the fact that we wrote white pride all over campus. So, fast forward a year, then we created the White Student Union, because you know what, it gets to that point, you might as well just say what we're talking about, and Western civilization is white. So, throughout the course of the year, we did a lot of great things. We did an affirmative action bake sale, we were able to organize on racial lines to advocate for white people. We actually got to face off against the communists in Washington, D.C. Some of you saw the video on May Day, which I got the joy of having a nice bag of urine thrown on me and getting punched in the face. But, to be fair, one of my buddies, Scott Terry, punched a Jewess and knocked her unconscious. So I'm going to consider that a wash for the day. So that's kind of who I am and where I'm coming from. But the question is, where are we going? Because, I'm a Marylander. We are below the Mason-Dixon line. We have a strong Southern tradition. Our state song, for instance, ends with the phrase, "Huzzah, she spurns the northern scum." So I'm not a Southern Californian, and I've always been a proud Southerner. And that's one thing, where we have different regional identities. I'm sure there's people in this room who have different religious affiliations. Even in the South, for instance, I was at the League of the South Conference. I'm an active member of the Maryland League, which is an organization calling for secession of the Southern states. I roomed with a National Socialist who is also a folk religionist, and I myself am a devout Orthodox Christian, but there was one thing that kept us together, and why we were able to have a great weekend. We care about the survival of our people. And one thing we all know is very simple. Fractures within our movement over the past several decades, either through agent provocateurs, our own egos, desire for money, or simply because there's too many chiefs and not enough Indians, our movement has been in a circular firing squad for so long. Oh, so you don't support this tiny policy point? Well, I'm going to go and spend all of my energy destroying you and your organization, and so on and so forth. That is what we see in currently the white nationalist movement. There is this continual infighting. Now, luckily, this has fallen away as some of the old guard who had tremendous egos. I respect them for everything they did coming before me, But a lot of that infight seems to be dying away with the newer generation, and that inspires me. But where we're going from here, we can no longer be aiming towards reforming America. And that might seem controversial, but this system cannot be reformed, nor should we want to reform it. Because America, from our founding fathers onward, this was a system, let's just picture it, that our founding fathers basically were fighting over money. They didn't like paying taxes on tea. They didn't like paying just a tiny tidbit of the money back to the British Empire for the war that the colonial states started by violating treaties with France. And I won't get into that. But from the very beginning, as the prior speaker said, there's this been issue of the individual, where as Americans, we really haven't had a folk identity. It's always been this capitalist idea of going out and making something for ourselves. And I say that is the fundamental problem. America is a proposition nation, and that proposition has failed. It believes in democracy, equality, egalitarianism, all of these things that are the exact opposite of what we need to have the survival of our race. So, the question of where I think American Freedom Party, formerly American Third Position, and all pro-white organizations need to go. Fundamentally, white separatism. The creation of white homelands is the only way we can ensure the existence of our people. And that might seem antithetical. I mean, I'm sure there are people in this room who have fought under the federal flag, but we must realize this system cannot be reformed. We've talked about the access to media. We will never be able to get into the good club. No matter how many times we smile or try and work insidiously in the media, we're never going to get there. There's a level where us goy can never make it. You know, in terms of political power, look at what happened, well, thank you. Look at David Duke in regards to political success. When David Duke was running for governor of Louisiana, he had the full support of the movement. Every dollar we could pump into it. Actually, he had some prior great exposure with the media. He's well-spoken. And what happens? He got outspent something like 15 or 20 to 1 from out-of-state donors. And then what happens? They find trumped-up charges in which we've all seen the picture where David Duke got a tax refund for the year in question, but they still sent him to prison. So trying to have electoral success, the feds will always find a way to stop us from getting to that level because the empire is the problem. In the South, we would still have segregation to this day if it wasn't for the federal empire. And you look at politicians like Alabama Governor George Wallace, thinking back, if we can work within this system. When Governor Wallace was in charge, we had the police, the National Guard, Governor Wallace, all the people of Alabama supported him, and the people all across the South. Even when Governor Wallace ran for president in '68, Michigan, of all places, voted for him in the Democratic primary. So he had all the support you could possibly get at a grassroots level. But what happens? The federal government comes in with bayonets and tanks, they nationalize they federalize the National Guard, and then they force this change upon us. We cannot reform this system. The game is stacked against us from the beginning. They are guaranteed working for our destruction. Why, for instance, if the Republicans were the answer, then under George W. Bush we controlled the Congress, we controlled the Supreme Court, and the presidency, then we would have secured the border. We would have done something to stop our racial suicide, but we didn't. Because for Republicans and the capitalists, they have more interest in bringing in low-skilled labor, which pads their bottom line, than they care about their actual fundamental base. The Democrats simply believe in this egalitarian Jacobin belief in egalitarianism and want to destroy us. So we can't work within those two political parties. And we've seen now with David Duke, I think is the greatest example, with a political party trying to forge its way into the system, can't do it. Now, the importance of having a political party, like the American Freedom Party, is federal law in some regards still helps us. We're talking about breaking into the media, but under federal law, if we run campaign ads, they have to air them. That's one of the great things about still having a political party. So I don't say give up having a political party because it provides us some legal protections and access to be able to kick our way into the mainstream. But the goal that we need to be working towards is not simply getting a seat at the table. Because one seat at a table of multiculturalism still leaves us without a voice, still leaves us without a destiny. If we truly want to secure the existence of our people and a future for white children, the only way we can do that is the creation of a white homeland. Yeah, right. Now, when I say that at Republican events, that's when like the bricks start coming out. So I really appreciate that applause. But you know, the thing that we need to look at also in regards to where, that's also a question of where. Now, I would say there are four. It might seem large, but there are four different movements that are currently working. I myself am a member of the League of the South, working towards the secession of the southern states, based, however, though, on the idea that a Southerner is white. We also have the Northwest Initiative that was, it's the Butler Plan, led by people like Harold Covington, the PLEs that are out there. Then we also have Alaska, which the Alaskan Independence Party, if you think how much power they fundamentally have, where even Sarah Palin, when running for governor, had to appeal to the Alaska Independence Party to be able to get their votes to become governor. She actually did an address for their convention when she was running for governor. So Alaska is actually light years ahead of us in terms of a secessionist movement, and then of course in the Northeast, where it's not about, for instance, just putting a dot on the map and saying, to Southerners it's time to pick up and move to Montana. It's not saying to folks, you really have to give up your home, but we need to start moving into organic folk communities with the express purpose of white separatism, because we cannot work within this system because the system is fundamentally stacked against us. And what we need to do with that is, for instance, so say the American Freedom Party. We ask, what are you fighting for? Well, we're fighting for a white homeland. As Richard Spencer recently referred to it at the American Renaissance Conference, white Zionism. That might seem crazy, that term, but fundamentally think of it in terms of Zionism. 20 years before the creation of Israel, Zionism was almost a lunatic, fringe idea amongst the Jewish community. But there was the vanguard who kept saying, a Jewish state, a homeland for the Jewish people, this is what we're working towards. And when the moment came for that to happen, they were there. They had created the myths, they had created the heroes, they had created the folk songs, they'd be able to create everything that was necessary to be able to create out of nothing a culture and create the Jewish state.